Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Unqualified podcast, the podcast where two lifelong fans try to make sense of their teams and usually fail. I am Pat. I'm flying solo today. It's Father's Day. It's a special day. Shout out to all the dads, grandfathers, stepdads, mentors, coaches who've made a difference along the way. I want to remind you guys, if you're not following us, definitely check us out on Instagram at the UQ Podcast. And you can catch full episodes on YouTube and Spotify. And this is just a reminder that today's episode is brought to you by Dr. Arnie Oliveira and the Empowerment Counseling Center. We call this show fan therapy because being a sports fan can feel like an emotional roller coaster. But real therapy has the ability to truly change lives. And for over a decade, Dr. Arnie has been doing that, helping individuals, couples, and families work through life's biggest challenges and create lasting positive change. So if you or someone you know needs help, definitely have them reach out to Dr. Arnie at 407-775-2949. Real therapy for real life, fan therapy for everything else. And I want to start out today's episode by talking about the New York Knicks. They're NBA champions. A lot of people never thought they'd see the day. First title since 1973, the first time they were in the finals since 1999. And seeing all the celebrations, New York City really coming together. The parade was awesome. The thing that really got me emotional was seeing the videos of fathers and sons, particularly sons who grew up watching the Knicks with their dad, who may not be here anymore, and having the chance to really call that out and talk about what the title means to them. And it was emotional. It's emotional seeing those things. And those are the things that really got me choked up, because so much of sports is family and tradition and just the act of being with family and taking in games together as a family. Those are some of my greatest memories. So thinking about my dad a lot lately, he was the one that obviously got me into the Jets and becoming a Jets fan. And he took me to my first Mets game, and we watched the Islanders all through my youth. He would tell me the stories, the 4 straight Stanley Cups. So those were really great memories. And just kind of reflecting on, some things that stand out. Obviously Sundays watching football together, not only with him, but with my entire family, my mom cooking and, my brother there. Yeah, it was just a time to be together. And regardless if the Jets won or lost on Sunday, it was still memorable because we were together. We were being passionate together. We were enjoying a meal together. And it was just that feeling of togetherness that will always live in my memory and in my heart. A couple of games to really stand out. Well, I distinctly remember going to my first Mets game. It had to be, I used to have the ticket stub, but it had to be 1990. I was 7 years old, and it was Mets and Cardinals at Shea Stadium. My dad brought us, the whole family, me, my brother, my mom, and don't recall if the Mets won that day, but I do remember David Cohn pitching that day for the Mets, and the famous kissing bandit, a blonde woman who used to run out onto the field in the 70s and 80s and early 90s and kiss a player. And I distinctly remember her running onto the field. I'm not sure if she kissed Cone, but it was something I'll never forget. And I just remember being at Shea Stadium, first of all, walking in to the fluorescent murals that lit up in the front with the players' silhouettes. That was always very memorable. It sticks out in my mind. Obviously, the apple in center field that lit up and popped up when there was a home run. Yeah, so that was a great memory with him. Islanders wise, he got me into watching that team in the early 90s. And ironically enough, they bring back the coach, Al Arbor, to coach the team in the early 90s, the coach that led them to 4 straight Stanley Cups in the early 80s. So they bring him back and the team gets on a run in 1993. It's one of the most memorable periods for me as a kid, watching that Stanley Cup playoff run by the Islanders, led by Pierre Turgeon, Patrick Flatley, Steve Thomas, Glenn Healy in goal, and Arbor behind the bench, Ray Ferraro. And I distinctly remember staying up with him. Patrick Division final against the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Penguins were coming off, I believe, back-to-back Stanley Cups. The Isles really gave them all they can handle. And it went to a game 7, and David Volek scored in overtime for the Islanders to shock the Pittsburgh Penguins, the defending Stanley Cup champions. And I just remember going crazy with my dad that night. I know it was very late at night, might have been double overtime, but that's definitely a core memory for me with him and with the Islanders. And then there's a lot of Jets memories, a lot of heartbreak. My earliest Jet memory is the 1991 season finale against the Dolphins, where they needed to win to get into the playoffs. They won on a last second field goal. It was Raul Allegre. And then the following week, they played the Oilers in the wild card game on my birthday, December 29th. That was one of my earliest Jet memories. So I was 8 at that time. And I just remember watching that game with him, the 98 team and that playoff run. Obviously it ended in heartbreak, but just remember watching every moment, every quarter, every game with him in that 98 season. I believe that was the first season when we got NFL Sunday Ticket because we had moved to Florida. And that was the first year with Sunday Ticket where we could watch every single game. Obviously Parcells' second year with the team. And that was just a season to remember. And then you have 2000, the Midnight Miracle, staying up late with my dad and my brother to watch that, coming back from down 30-7 in the fourth quarter. I remember my dad and my brother wanted to go to bed that night, and I wouldn't let them. I was like, no, they're going to come back. And they eventually did, winning the game 40-37 in overtime. My dad had a tradition, starting with that 98 run by the Jets, a couple traditions. One, he would always have this, I guess you would call it a paper towel or a napkin, that he kind of rolled up into like an elongated, skinny stress ball that he started in the 98 season. And he had that for several years after that. And it was always kind of his good luck charm. And then we had a little Jets football that we would throw around during the games that also started during the 98 season. And it would say Jets, 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 Jets when you threw it and when you hit it a certain way. My brother actually still has that ball, and it still has a little bit of life in it. Obviously, the 2002 season when Pennington took over for Vinny was also really memorable, watching all the games with him that year. And then on December 29th, on my birthday, I remember being with him and my mom cooking a big meal, and the Jets actually winning that game in the last game of the season, beating the Green Bay Packers. And then they needed Miami to lose to New England. That happened. Everything broke the right way. The Jets crushed the Packers. They clinched the AFC East, and it was an improbable run. They win the wild card game, then they have to go to Oakland, and they don't fare so well in that one. But it was just those few weeks there at the end of the 2002 season, so memorable, being with him and watching with him. And obviously he's Italian. The thing I remember the most is him getting just so worked up during some of these questionable coaching decisions from our teams, whether it be the Islanders or the Jets. And he would get very worked up. He loved to see the passion in the players and the coaches. If we saw our coach on the sideline kind of just like, seemingly indifferent, that would really bother him. So I remember him just getting so worked up about those moments and, always thinking before every year, maybe this could be our year. Maybe this is going to be our year, son. And, even though it obviously didn't work out, the time I spent with him watching those games and the quality time I spent with him watching those games and being with him and reminiscing about teams past and moments, that stuff I'm never going to forget. Never going to forget. Probably the biggest heartbreak we experienced together, it had to have been the 1998 Jets and the AFC title game at Denver, because we really felt, I think all Jets fans felt like that was the team. We had a team that could go win the Super Bowl that year. And as the season went on, they got better. Testaverde was playing at an all-time high. You had Curtis Martin, Keyshawn Johnson, Wayne Corbett, a great offensive line and an opportunistic defense led by Bill Belichick, Mo Lewis, Brian Cox, Aaron Glenn. And they just kept finding ways to win games. And you just kind of felt like this was the year. We all knew. And I remember my dad was kind of tempering my enthusiasm because he could be a realist at times. He didn't always have the rose-colored glasses on him. Sometimes when you're a kid, obviously you do. So I remember him telling my brother and I, like, this is going to be a tough game in Denver. John Elway, was probably going to be his last game at Mile High. And he was very nervous going into that game. And yeah, it unfortunately didn't end the way we wanted to, although they had us believing for a while, a very strange first half in that game. The Jets were able to move the ball really effectively on Denver's defense, but they only could manage 3 points in the first half. And then they really were able to stymie Elway in that offense. Just a great game plan by Bill Belichick in that first half. You know, Terrell Davis really didn't have any big chunk runs. They were able to win the field position battle in that first half. And then early in the second half, they get the block punt. They recover at the 1 yard line. Then Curtis Martin runs it in on the next play. And they're up 10-0 in the third quarter. And you don't want to touch the money in that situation. But wow, we were all going crazy thinking this team was going to the Super Bowl. And then it was just one mistake after another. And they just couldn't recover. And it was just like an avalanche of bad things. The worst things you could think of in a football game to happen to your team happened in that game. And they ended up losing 23-10. And probably a close second in terms of heartbreak was the following season, week 1, season opener against the Patriots. We're all going into that season. And I don't remember my dad being as pumped up for a season as he was for 99. They had come off the AFC Championship. Vinny was coming back. The whole team was coming back, obviously. And they made a few upgrades. They signed Steve Atwater on defense. They signed Bernie Parmalee. They signed Eric Green. So they added a few more pieces to that team in hopes, they were going to be able to get over the hump. And then they come out great against the Patriots. Second quarter, Vinny hands it off to Curtis. He fumbles. Vinny goes for the ball, and boom, he pops his Achilles. And you heard the air come out of the stadium at Giant Stadium that day when you were watching it on TV. And at home in our house, it was the same. It was silence. And I just remember my dad being silent and then just letting it all out. I can't believe this. And he obviously felt so bad for Vinny, and we all did. And that was the second biggest heartbreak Jets heartbreak that we experienced together. And, sharing beers over the game, it's just those things you're never going to forget. At least I'm not ever going to forget that. So I want to talk to you about, he was a big Yankees fan. And when they got on that run in the mid 90s, early 2000s, I watched all those games with him. Even though my heart was with the Mets, I was pulling for the Yankees, pulling for him. Those were some exciting teams. And I'm not one of these Mets fans that has hate in my heart for the Yankees. They're New York. I wish them the best. I've always pulled for them. I have family members, a lot of family members who are Yankees fans. And I'd always pull for them because of my dad. And watching those teams and those runs were also super memorable. A lot of late night games, big hits, Jeter, Posada, Tino Martinez, Bernie Williams, all those guys. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that too, because those are some great memories with him. So this is the question that's been traveling through the New York airwaves lately. Who is the next team that's going to win a championship in New York? Obviously, if you look at it objectively, it's probably the Yankees. They've been the closest. They've been right there. They probably have the best team overall. The biggest superstar in Judge, although he's obviously out right now. But then I started thinking, who's after that? Who is the next closest team to winning a title in New York? And my fiance would be mad, but we're not counting the Bills. We're not going to count the Bills. I would probably say you look at the Mets, they seem really far away right now. You could have made the argument a couple of years ago, when they had the run in 2024, OMG, Grimace, all that. It's not them. Jets, don't get me started. They're going to be much improved this year, but they are not next in line to win a championship. We all know that. They need to take a step first, and that means being a competitive team. And I talk about it all the time, being in the playoff hunt, being in the picture. That's the next step for them. Islanders, potentially. They're in the conversation. One, because they've been a playoff team / fringe playoff team the last 5 years or so. Actually, you want to say 6 since Barry Trotz came and they had those 2 Eastern Conference final runs. Then they missed the playoffs, made the playoffs, missed the playoffs. And now they've got a coach who has been there and done that and taken teams to the conference finals, taken teams to the Stanley Cup finals. And they have a young superstar in Matthew Schaefer. So I don't just have the the rose-colored glasses on here. I do believe the Islanders are in the conversation to be the next New York team to win a championship. The Rangers a little farther away, if we're being honest, and also because of the nature of the NHL. You just saw a Vegas Golden Knights team with under 40 regular season victories, firing their coach with a few games left in the season, going on a run and getting to the Stanley Cup final. So the nature of hockey just kind of lends itself to having, teams go on improbable runs more often. So that's why I would say the Isles are in the conversation. The Giants are definitely in the conversation because we think they have the franchise quarterback now and they have a Super Bowl winning coach in place. So you got to say the Isles and the Giants are in that conversation, definitely, to be the next New York team to win a title. You can even see the Knicks running it back, but we're taking the Knicks out of that conversation right now. Yankees, Isles, Giants, whoever it is, we talked about it on a previous episode with Brendan, what it would mean for the city of New York to get another championship. And what would that like for the fan bases that haven't seen it in so long? The Knicks, 53 years. The Jets now are closing in on 60 years. And what that would look like if they were ever able to win another Super Bowl, I think would be insane. It would be crazy. So, and that's the thing I've learned over the years, being a sports fan and making all these memories with my dad, with my family over these games. That's what matters. It's not the wins and the losses. I know we get crazy, we get worked up about all that, but the memories are what matters. And the players you remember, the plays you remember, who you were with, what you were eating, what you were drinking, where you were, the community sense of it all. To me, that's what really matters in sports. And I know we get caught up with our teams and getting worked up. And, obviously we all want to see our teams win, but the memories are what matters. Don't forget that. So again, I want to wish all the dads, stepfathers, grandfathers, coaches, mentors a happy Father's Day. Keep making those memories with your little ones or your big ones. And yeah, everyone, hope you guys have a great day. Just a reminder, if you're not following us, definitely follow us on Instagram at the UQ Podcasts. And you can get full episodes on YouTube and Spotify. We'll see you next time, guys, on the Unqualified Podcast.